Okay, good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. It's 5:46 in the evening. This is a special meeting of the Weston, Connecticut Board of Education to talk about the capital budget. We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the next, Lisa's lost her voice, so I'll carry it on as long as I can, then Phil and Mike can weigh in. So we propose, this has to do with the capital budget that we agreed to as a board and presented to the Board of Selectmen. Phil, Lisa, and I had a meeting with them. Now it's like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, and they were uncomfortable with what we proposed, which was $3.3 million, and asked us if we could come back with a reduction. And Phil, in conjunction with Mike, our new director of and our new director of safety and security, and others, came up with a reduction that brought the number from $3.3 million to $1.7 million, and you can see where the reductions are. But I need to point out that yes, we reduced it from 3.3 million to 1.7 for the upcoming fiscal year. But if you look at the currently proposed budget for fiscal year 27, 28, and 29, and we've just moved things a year out. So the key drivers of the reduction was a $230,000 reduction in security initiatives, Phil, which you need to address. The HVAC system, the funding for that is going to be split over 2 years, and Mike can address that. After going out for the cost of the new radio upgrade, that was actually increased by $50,000. And then there were the biggest thing was, in addition to these, was the high school locker room heating replacement. That actually had a conversation around it. We took it out, and Kareem actually was thinking about putting it back in because he thought that we should. He looked at the numbers and he said we should actually smooth the budget, meaning, keep it at a level, but a consistent level, regardless of what the level was. But at the end of the day, the other selectmen didn't agree with that. I think that's a fair way to look at it, Phil. And so with that, I don't know if you want to ask questions or where everybody wants to go with it. So this budget, the budget of 1.710 is the capital budget approved by the selectmen, and that's the budget that the Board of Finance tomorrow. There's a Board of Finance meeting at 6 o'clock to review our budget. That's the number that they're looking at.
Well, I'll jump in with a point of view on it. I
Sure.
don't have an immediate question, but I do have a point of view about it. If others have questions, feel free to cut me off. I'm inclined to almost lodge a protest vote on this a little bit. I'll tell you why. It's more about the procedure, really, than it is about what the final number is. If the administration comes back and says we can do these things, then okay. But I really do ask this sort of existential question of, like, what the heck did we do just spending our last 6 weeks coming up with a budget that went through multiple rounds? In fact, that we pushed on the administration quite hard to find different numbers. We heard from parents about the drama program, et cetera, et cetera. Went on and on and on. And then what we get back is like, well, this slightly arbitrary feeling of HVAC and security measures. And I don't really feel as though the number that the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen are trying to achieve doesn't make much sense to me. It just seems slightly arbitrary. I really don't see the wisdom of kicking the can down the road, given the pattern of investment we've been in for quite a while. So I've seen, and not that I don't share some of the same priorities regarding safety, but if you look at the last 2 years of sitting here and listening to parents talk to us about safety, the way in which both David, but certainly Michael, have tried to make that a significant issue, it seems like we've made some good progress with that. The whole thing seems to me a little bit ham-fisted that then the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen says, make these changes. What the heck was the point of our entire budget process if that's what we come to? And so my thought is, why not just say, no, let's revert back to the budget we originally submitted? So, not to throw out a completely inflammatory beginning to the meeting, but that's my thoughts.
Okay? Why don't we take other people's comments and then we see how we address them? Lisa or Michael or Sharon?
Yeah, what was their thinking on, I mean, we cut the budget, and I'm sure that,
We cut the operating budget.
yeah, okay, but what was their thinking about cutting those particular items, especially security, and we've heard parents talk about it?
They didn't reduce them, we reduced them. They wanted a reduction in the overall budget, capital budget, not the operating budget. They're fine with the operating budget. They wanted a reduction in the overall capital budget because they think it's, the gross number is more than the town can bear in the upcoming fiscal year. Yeah.
And as it relates to security, one of the reasons why we originally recommended eliminating that 3,000 placeholder was that, one, we have two items addressing security, really. We have the radio project, and we also have the PA system at 3 schools. And in addition to that, we believe that in terms of all the funding that we currently have, that we have adequate funding in place once Director Wilsey has an opportunity to truly evaluate, he's in the process of doing a forensic audit, as he said, of our entire system, and then making the recommendation that he deems it necessary. So I think in the near term, we do have funds available that can cover any new purchases. I think this year we knew that we had to address the quick alert buttons, and we had the non-lapsing account that was established. And one of the purpose of that non-lapsing account was to address items related to security and also other deficit items within the budget. So based on where we are currently and how current trends are, we do believe that we will continue to have funds available in that non-lapsing account, and also maybe a few extra dollars left over from other appropriations that were made for security.
And we did caveat the reduction by saying that Jim is doing a forensic audit, and he may come back and say, no, I need X, Y, and Z. Like he came back and said, I need $50,000 more to get the radio project done, and that they should, if in fact that's the case, they should expect that we're going to come back and ask for supplemental appropriation.
And
So that's on the table. That was not left unsaid.
correct, and to the credit of the Board of Selectmen, they did add back $100,000 into our request, because our initial proposal was to take that line out to make it zero. They added $100,000.
So I'll jump. Lisa, do you have any more comments?
No.
Okay. I guess a general just observation, then a couple more specific questions. The general observation is, look, we all knew the capital budget this year was higher than it has been in the past. I guess when you look forward, there were a number of items here that were moved, right? So the security initiatives were reduced by 230. But there were a number of items, the furniture purchase, the LED retrofit, the locker room replacement, the cafeteria table portion, the field site work. A lot of these were moved, those items were moved, it looks like, to 2027. But the 2027 budget, capital budget, as it stands currently, is even more than our prior one. And so, and then you look further, and even if you took out the high school D-wing renovation, which is in here for, 4.4 million, even if you took that out, that's elevated, and then the next year is elevated. And so I think that these are things that are going to get, either we're going to continuously kick the can with these things, or we're going to have to cut them.
Yep.
And that's going to be sort of, the ultimate realization here is that these things aren't getting moved, they're getting cut. And if they are getting moved, then they're crowding out other investments, I guess, going forward. So I guess to Mike Del Mastro, just a quick question for you, or maybe not quick, but looking at all those things that I just referenced that are being moved to 2027, what are the implications of moving those about a year and/or multiple years, or cutting them entirely? So it makes your job obviously difficult, and I understand there's a balance here, right, between we all want to be fiscally prudent, but I think that some of the delays and decisions that we've made or that have been made in the past, sort of now this is all encroaching upon us pretty quickly. So I would love to hear from you, sort of the impact, your outlook. What are things here that, let's say in the future, let's say for next year, that we absolutely have to get done, knowing that a lot of these things may just get cut entirely?
Yeah, it's difficult. Came up with a plan. What it's going to do is it's going to increase the man hours for maintenance. It's like the systems that we have here, 18 systems, 1960s, so nothing is new. Requires a lot more maintenance. I can't speak of anything that I would say tomorrow is going to catastrophically fail, including the locker room unit, although it does show signs of issues and repeat calls to it. But it's hard to project what could fail in a year, what could fail in 2 years. Yeah, it's just a difficult call. And unfortunately, where we are now, this is just a small unit for the locker room. I'm just going to give you an example of what we have coming up. The high school units, the intermediate school units are all, they're all hitting that 20-year mark. You get about 20, 30 years out of a unit. So 5 years down the line, just the cafeteria unit alone at the high school, if we replace that tomorrow, it's $500,000. And that's one unit of the 18, 19 units that we have in just those two buildings. So to keep pushing things down is going to get difficult. It's going to get more costly. But yeah, that's where we're at.
And that's a good point too, because I think pushing these things forward, I don't think you just carry over the 50,000, the 75,000, the 190. Now those things are higher by, I don't know, 10, 15, 20%, whatever it is.
Plus
Yeah.
tariffs.
I'm sorry?
Plus tariffs.
Yeah.
Potentially.
They're talking tariffs could,
so,
in
yeah.
the future, could be 25, 30% on units. It's going to increase labor rates. It's going to increase lead time for material to be coming in. So we're up against some difficult times coming ahead.
So we start the year, let's say next year, let's assume the budget gets approved for what it is now, the 1.7, which to be fair too, look, is elevated, right, from, historically. I think we start next year really having to take a look at this capital budget and having to actually redline items here, because they're just going to get kicked down the road in perpetuity. And we're going to have to make some decisions, I guess. Two other questions I had, just really quickly to finish up. The security initiatives, I think I know the answer. You guys have alluded to this. On the security initiatives, you guys have been in consultation with Jim on this, correct? So there is, as Steve said, there is an opportunity if Jim comes back and says, hey, it's actually not, I previously said I thought we could get by with 100, but we actually need 150. So there could be room here for a special appropriation. I think if I heard Steve correctly, is that right?
So we did mention to the Board of Selectmen that if there's a need, we'll seek a special appropriation. Based on how things are trending currently for this fiscal year, we believe that we will have, it's possible, that there may be some funds available in that non-lapsing account. And if that trend continues, that those funds will be available to cover those expenditures.
Okay, great. So that's TBD. The final point here, I guess, is on this North House HVAC replacement, which it looks like, so we originally said, okay, look, my inquiry at the beginning of this, of course, was whether or not we could just cut this in half and do it over 2 years. And I think it was impressed upon me and the rest of the board. I think there was a view that, hey, look, the most efficient way of doing this and avoiding any delay would be just approve it all up front. Peter, I know you had your view on that, and I'm not going to dispute it altogether. I thought we're trying to balance out here sort of the spend, and personally, I thought it was unrealistic. I know you thought it was maybe more pragmatic. Okay, it does look like, so 2 questions on this. Number one, it looks like we reduced that amount now by a couple $100,000 in total over the 2 years. And so why did we reduce it? And then secondly, is there a concern, as there was expressed at the beginning, which, look, I voted for because it needs to get done, even though I didn't agree necessarily with the allocation. Is there any concern here that does end up now, if we split it in two, as was told to me during the discussion, that there's going to be some sort of delay there in getting that project done? So 2 questions. Why reduced? Any concern the delay?
I'll start with the reduce. We did propose to split the project over 2 years at $875. There was some discussion amongst the members of the Board of Selectmen. A reference was made to the Colliers report, that the Colliers report has a total all-in project cost of $1.3 million. I keep repeating that the Colliers report is not a new study. What the Colliers report is escalated cost from a study that was done back in 2017, which was a 1-for-1 replacement. Our thinking behind this is that we were no longer going to do a 1-for-1 replacement because a lot of the technology in the building, including the unit ventilators, are outdated, and we wanted to change it wherever possible, not to have that. And Mike always tells me that a new technology is going to where there's a heat pump embedded in the unit. So that was our thinking. And because that was our thinking, and Mike did a math based on what current prices are, we came up with a 1.7 number. So we split that number, we split our amount in two over 2 years, and then the Board of Finance, relying on all those cost estimates in that Collier's escalated report, reduced the project by $400,000. Our plan to reduce it by $400,000, $200 in fiscal year '26, with an additional $200 in fiscal year '27. So that's on the cost side.
Yeah, and it would be really a nice project to be able to do in a year, but after speaking with mechanical contractors, there's no way in 9 weeks that they would be able to get 24 rooms, 24 classrooms, a gymnasium unit, and a makeup area unit done in that bit of time. So it would have to be split up into 2 years anyhow, whether it been first floor, second floor, and possibly splitting up the makeup area unit in the basement, which has hallways, common areas, and the unit for the gym. So over a couple of years isn't really the worst thing in the world, because they can't physically, they don't have the manpower to dump all their mechanics into our project to do the whole bell and whistle job.
And to Peter's point, where we had in our discussion that where it's going to be difficult to have a contractor to sign off on a project without fully funded. So by splitting the project over 2 years, if we're looking at a true start date, the true start date is not going to be until 3 years. Because if we have half the money right now, the first half of the money definitely get us the design, The design component will be done in the first half of the year. What's going to be missing is a purchase price. A vendor is not necessarily going to just accept a purchase order just for a partial purchase price when the overall project or the scope that we will provide them is going to be significantly higher than that. So then we have to wait for the second round of funding. The second round of funding does not fully get approved until May of '26. In May of '26, we cannot start the project in summer. So what that means is that we can award that project in May or so of fiscal '20, by that time '27? '27. So we're securing our place in line, so to speak, so there can be maybe some shop work, but ultimately, we're not having a contractor here until the summer of '28. Right? And in addition to that, when you look at the scope of what we're proposing, so in summer of '28, we awarded, we have the first nail on the ground, right? So we start a project then. If they're unable to finish this project, that's going to, again, get swing to the following year, so that becomes a 4-year project. Because based on the timeline, right, based on what we're thinking, we're looking that this project will take us about 4 months. If the project takes us 4 months, we do not have swing space for the students at Hurlbut. So we're doing a lot here by making all these shifts, and a lot of the shifts that we're making is really to be mindful of the town and the overall costs or true cost of all capital projects. The capital projects coming in combined between town and Board of Education this year, I think the initial request was somewhere to the tune of $6 million. So even if you look at the escalated Collier's report, right, whether those numbers are soft or not, those are projects that we have to get done, right, over a 10-year span. And over a 10-year span, pure average is $5 million per year. And if we're thinking that and we smooth that out over 5 years, it's $5 million. Now, each time we decide that our capital budget is too high, we pause and we say, let's rethink, let's defer something else, and we defer and defer. So I just wanted to kind of just really paint the full picture of the impact of the decision that we did, right, to be in line with the Board of Selectmen and their budget as to truly what the timeline will be for the North House project.
So it's effectively delaying the project by a year, when all is said and done.
Having the full funding in year one, it
In
delays
year
it
one,
by a
correct.
year.
Yes, because correct, because the second round of funding does not happen. In order for us to start the project, let's say in May, June of fiscal, get my years right, '26, we would need to award a contract to a vendor by January, right? In January, we don't have approval for a budget, so then we have to wait.
Okay.
So as it stands now, in order for us to be able to get the project done in 2027, we have to have the full amount approved now, not the capital budget that's in front of us as it stands. We'd have to add the additional amount in. By waiting and approving the final amount next year, it delays the project another year, right? So we're talking 2028 at that stage. And even then, would we then, you said it's a 4-month project, obviously the minimal disruption to students, 4 months isn't going to work. So with that, then it's half of it done in 2028, the other half done in 2029.
Correct.
So this is a long way off.
It is a long way off. But so this is one of the reasons why, to Peter's point, it was important to have that funding in place upfront in year one. So although we may not have, or we did not have at that time, a solid plan with all the engineering and with all the specs laid out, but we knew based on the timing of what we were trying to accomplish, having all the funds funded in year one was the way to go. Now granted, we understood that this was going to cost us, it was an expensive project, and it was a lot to ask the taxpayers and everyone, right, everyone in town to fund this project right now, knowing that we did not necessarily have all the specs and everything else that we needed to have in place at this time when we discuss our budget. So a lot of times when we may propose items and not have everything in place, we time it out in such a way where that by the time we do get to when we would award, everything would be in order.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the reasons why we kind of front-loaded, right, let's call it front-loaded in year one with all of these things in consideration.
Right.
But I'll just say, Phil, on that, look, I agree, I want to get these things done as quickly as possible, right? Look, it has to get done. I mean, I guess my retort to this whole thing was just that, we're trying to, the decision is not made in a vacuum, right? And so the 1.7 alone was a greater amount in the capital budget than, let's say, the previous, average, just by itself. And so it just didn't seem feasible to me. I want it done next year, right? That's why I voted for it. But it felt like that was setting us up to fail in terms of, look, I guess we threw a Hail Mary, right? And no one caught it, right? Because at the end of the day, we would have liked them to approve it. I think we probably knew that they probably wouldn't approve it. But I guess, look, if you don't try, you don't necessarily, get what you don't get what you don't ask for. So
There's one thing I want to say. The numbers are from 2017.
Right.
So this has been discussed since 2017. That's part of our frustration. You're talking about 8 years. It's been discussed that we knew we had a problem here.
I
So
agree with you,
it's-
Lisa. And it's not the
it's-
only thing, right? Because
I know.
look at this list. There are
I
a whole
know.
bunch of things that I think that we all want to get done as soon as possible. And we've all been probably looking at this, I don't know, I've only been here for a year and a half, but I'm sure we've been looking at this for a number of years. And so, we have to make decisions on this stuff. I just want to make sure we're going about this, we're considering the feasibility of this sort of as we move forward, even though I understand your point. There's action that needs to happen here sooner than later.
I mean, if you look at this, I mean, this is the history of Weston in general, and is that we keep pushing things further and further out. And I'm not at all, as an individual, I'm not at all apologetic for saying, I mean, if you look at this list, these aren't, these aren't nice to haves. These are, we have to have it, or we should have had it in 2017. And this board has just said, okay, this is it, enough pushing it further and further away.
I mean,
Steve,
I agree with you. I think then, really, if you look back over the last couple of years, the capital budget was artificially low.
Right.
Right? It shouldn't have been about 1 million. It should have been about 1.5, let's say.
But it's
over the
always been
last 6 years.
artificially low, unfortunately.
I'm sorry?
It's been, always been artificially low.
Right, and now we're having to play catch-up, right, and
And-
make tough decisions.
And it's because it's really the only budget that you can play around with, right? Because everybody else, be it our operating budget or even the town's operating budget, is basically all personnel. So
So-
that's a harder decision to make, right? What do I want to do? Do I want to fire somebody or not buy a car?
Well, I mean, part of my comments just during the operating budget too was not that I, again, my kids go here, right? Not that I want to cut things, but I also want, it's sort of like, the national debate of entitlements, right? At some point, someone has to make a tough decision, and we're trying to make smaller cuts sooner to avoid making larger cuts later and having an impact. And I know you may disagree, but that's the reality of it.
I don't disagree.
No, I know, no, Peter was shaking his head, but maybe he feels differently. That's just the reality of it. I'm trying to avoid
Okay.
a more cataclysmic sort of impact, let's say, in the classroom by making, smaller cuts today than waiting.
I agree. And you know what? Mike, you mentioned that the other systems, 19 units that we have, and they're all headed towards, if not already at their end of life, useful life. We shouldn't, there should be no surprises in these budgets. We know when the HVACs were installed. We know when various systems need to be updated or renewed. And so, I've been a board member now, I guess this is my fourth budget or fifth budget. I'm a rookie compared to you, Phil, but, we can't artificially lower this capital budget, in my opinion, anymore. And in doing so, we're kicking the can down the road and we're hurting ourselves further. Either we're going to maintain these buildings, or we're not. And that's not an option. We don't have that option, right? So I appreciate that the Board of Selectmen said, you need to decrease your capital budget. I certainly appreciate that. I tend to lean more towards what Kareem said, which is rather than having a dip down, which is still higher than last year. Actually, what was our capital budget for last year, Phil? I tried to look it up while I was here. I don't know.
I think it was just over $1 million last year. 1.1.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So, to go to 1.7 this year is still a tremendous increase, but the reality is it needs to be 3, right? And if you're looking at, the projected, to Michael's point, 3 million, 7 million, almost 4 million, like, we're not doing anybody any favors by lowering this budget unless the unforeseen from our side is that the Board of Selectmen, again, right pocket, left pocket, all the same tax dollars. If the Board of Selectmen has an unusually high request for capital budget this year, which it sounds as if they may, and that's why they're asking us to lower our capital budget. If that's the case, I would love to know. I've been a little busy, haven't had a chance to watch the Selectmen meeting. So if this is something that I'm not aware of, share, let me know. But otherwise, I'm somewhat inclined to say, perhaps not back up to 3.6, but, maybe we need to push it up higher than 1.7, add some of these things back in, try to get a year back rather than 3 or 4 years down the line having the HVAC system replaced and repaired at Hurlbut, make it 2 to 3. These are our learners. These are our youngest kids. We need them to make sure that their air quality is what it should be, that they have air conditioning on a 90-degree day and they can actually focus on their learning as opposed to, what sounds outside the windows because all the windows are wide open. So I personally lean towards saying, unless there's a reason from the Board of Selectmen as to why we, as a Board of Education, should cut our capital budget, I tend to lean towards saying, no, let's.
Well, just know the process. The Board of Selectmen.
Their vote is great, but it's the Board of
But
Finance
it's the
that
Board-
actually
The Board of
counts.
Selectmen have no,
Right, that's why I'm saying,
they have no power here.
right, that's why I'm saying, I appreciate their feedback, I really do, but unless there's a compelling reason as to why we should bite the bullet this year and kick the can further down the road and cause all these delays in these systems that we need to address responsibly, I'm not inclined to lower our budget so that we end up having just a huge blip next year. We're,
But-
back at it again next year.
And just also, the Board of Finance can reduce our capital budget line by line. They can't do that in the operating budget, and so can the ATBM. So, this is going to be an iterative process of
Whether we
defending.
pass this budget or not, that's still a case.
Yeah, no, that's the
So,
process.
I fully expect at the ATBM to have people come in, especially if we come in at a $3 million capital budget. I fully expect to have a group of parents and residents in the ATBM saying, this line item by this line item. And you know what? If that's the case, if they choose to take things away from us at that stage,
Shame on them.
shame on them. But as a board member, I think we have a responsibility to maintain these facilities. And if we allow the pressure of outside forces to shirk our responsibilities, shame on us. So that's how I feel about it. That's just my 2 cents.
Can I just talk real quick just about procedure or process, because I think it was the big thing. So Board of Education submits the budget to the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen reviews, makes their recommendation. Then the Board of Selectmen votes on what budget that they want to convey to the Board of Finance. So, at this stage, the conversations that we need to have, right, based on all these conversations, will be with the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, because that's the next step within our budget process. So it's just the Board of Selectmen, they voted to, I don't necessarily think the word was recommend, but they voted to convey our operating budget as well as our capital budget. So any arguments that we would need to make will need to be made to the Board of Finance.
Right. Yeah, right.
I think we
Go
could
ahead.
defend it, personally.
Can you indulge me for a couple minutes?
No.
It's dinner time, but I need a few minutes because this is an excellent discussion.
Can you,
I don't have
I'm
trigonometry,
hearing music, you're
but I
being,
do have algebra. So I do have one little math question.
Yeah.
So I think this is a watershed budget for two reasons. Actually, three reasons. The first is, as Chad says, it reveals the conundrum. And the conundrum is the expertise in this room we have to defer and then relinquish our control over the health and well-being and educational outcomes of students and staff to the political vagaries of the town, ATBM, Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen. And honestly, I think these gentlemen and this superintendent have much more experience than the vagaries of the town to figure out what's best for our four buildings, our administrative building, and all the people involved, which is about 2,500 people a day on the campus. So we've exposed the vagaries, but we know the process. We have to work through that. So why is it a watershed budget? And I'll give you two examples. And you have to live with me for a minute of history to get to this point. 3 years ago, we were talking about ESSER funding, right? And during that discussion, and Mr. Pesco was the chair, David, and he's missing his chance for me to get complimented because he's not here tonight, raised two great questions. He was like, can we get something lasting in our investment? And if not, if we don't get something lasting, what could be the outcome of the focus of that investment? And are we tied to that investment? What he was referring to is if we hire a social emotional learner or a math interventionist, are we going to have that expense moving forward? It was two good questions. And I thought about what he was asking from the first point, what's lasting? So Tony and I had a sidebar, and I said, what's really lasting? And what ESSER allowed us to invest in was HVAC equipment. And we opted not to do that, right? And hindsight's 20/20, but we had a moment in time, and David stumbled upon it, and Tony and I agreed. He goes, that's going to be the rub. That's going to be the ultimate big expense for our town, is investing in that. And every year we delay, the investment's going to get uglier and uglier and more expensive. And that's when Tony turned to me and said, Pete, you're the engineer. It's your gig, right? And you've heard me talk for 3 years about it, right? So there's a history there. And we've delayed and delayed and delayed. So that's why this is a watershed event, because two things emerged. And number one is, and it's so interesting that Michael asked some insightful questions, because I remember when he stood up here as a parent and said, I don't get the security, right? Do we have a plan? How do we make investments? Do we assess this? And we lived with that for 16 months, for better or worse, right? And we've answered all those questions, right? So what's happened here in this budget? HVAC, the safety of our children, particularly her butt, has actually supplanted the security of the envelope of the building in the largest expense and probably the largest discussion this town will have moving forward because of the monetary amount, but also the implications for the health of the kids. So one may envision his analog, right, getting up in a few months and saying, hi, I have a second grader. They came home with a cough, a sneeze, a rash. They're not safe in this wing of her old butt. What are you doing about it, right? And it's the same discussion. But we had answers for the Mr. Guido's out there, right? We had the layered approach. The chief said, here it is, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, we have an approach. We assess, right? And then we have a new director of security that wrote the assessment, right? And guess what? Now, we actually now have the same ability, and we have to go through the same process with as big a monetary or bigger monetary stakes. So let me talk about that, then I'll talk about my last point. With respect to like the game plan, we actually have this, right? Remember I said I'll go to my workshop? Well, I know. We have a layered approach. We have the game plan public for when you come to public speaking and your son or daughter got sick in second grade. There is a game plan that we have to implement, right? Step by step, layer by layer, in all schools, particularly in Hurlbut, where we have a north wing problem. And guess what? The state asked us to do assessment. So we do assessing, because what does the state require of us? State law requires school districts to conduct an annual inspection and evaluation of indoor air quality in each school building. And one can boil that down to isolating a wing of a school building, right? So Mike and I have talked about this, like how do we know what's going on in that wing, right? So we owe the public that explanation. We have to do that assessment. It's so interesting that we have to do that assessment, because it's sort of like the structural engineer assessing in middle school. We don't know exactly what we're working with. But the discussion that you just had is exactly a preview of what we'll have to talk with at the public the first time a kid gets sick, knowing that we're delaying fixing an HVAC system that puts that kid at risk. So it's really watershed what's happened here. HVAC has supplanted security as maybe the issue that the parents latch onto, right? We already saw it at the Speak Out. Parents stood up and said, I want to know about HVAC. I mean, protecting my child against an intruder is important, but how about pathogens and ozone and dust? What are you doing about that? The second watershed part of this budget, and actually Michael talked about it, is, and here's the math question, look at the bottom line numbers, right? The sequence of numbers are 2, 4, 8. What are the two next numbers in that sequence? That's the math question. $16 and $32 million. It's exponential growth. So if Karen wants a smooth curve, he got a smooth parabolic curve. He doesn't get a linear curve. It's all about parabolic curves, right? And that's the deal. So it's not redlining. It's, in my assessment, the town of Weston better figure out how to pay a $50 million bill in the next 5 years, because that's where the curve's taking us, because it's mandatory, right? This isn't like a wish list. We're going to be $50 million in the hole unless we find the money, as in bond it in a referendum, to pay for that $50 million, because that's what 2 plus 4 plus 8 plus 16 plus 32, it's actually $60 million adds up to.
The number's higher.
The number's higher.
Right.
So that's why this is a watershed budget, because it reveals two things. We've now identified probably the key risk factor for our kids' education, HVAC, and we better raise $60 million right quick. So, yeah, it's a haircut in what happened this past weekend. St. Baldrick, right? I went to the middle school today to pick up Giselle, and all her friends shaved their heads, right? For Bodie, right? We got a haircut. And it's just a matter of Sharon says, do we live with the haircut, or do we go, no? It's unacceptable. But that's what the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance did to us. They St. Baldrick's us. And
Well,
we
the
have to
Board of
decide.
the Board of Finance hasn't done anything yet.
Well, okay, don't St. Baldrick's me. I support Bodie, but I think we need the money. All right, thank you for indulging me with that history.
And on a positive note, over $50,000 was raised.
That's a huge number when you think about it for this town. So where do we want to go with this? It sounds like we want to add back the full funding for HVAC.
Well, I think we should revert to the budget we submitted. I think it's a sound budget. I also think the other point about it is trying to point out that essentially the kicking the can down the road doesn't work, and in fact, it makes the situation worse each year. And if we don't begin to develop an appetite to actually deal with what needs to be dealt with, we're shooting ourselves in the foot each year. I do
Well-
think it's important. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Well, we've given them a roadmap for cuts. because this is a public document. So we've given them, I have no problem just going back with the original number.
I think we should go
personally
back
have
to the
no
original
problem at all.
number.
But we've given them, a bit of a roadmap. Not much of one, right? I mean, if we add back the full amount, it's still a, big number. The biggest reduction would be $230,000 in security initiatives and the cost of the locker room replacement.
But it's actually less than the 230 for security, because if you consider the radios are also a part of the security investment too, it's more of 180 for security. And not for nothing, of course, look, security, we all know that that's a priority, but especially with Jim in place, doing the assessment, for him to have an additional $100,000 to add to whatever he needs to this next year, I think is sufficient. If we need to come back and ask for more, that's fine. So 180 taken out of that, we can chip away at things, but the reality is I don't feel comfortable taking out the HVAC. I really don't. A year's a long time, and as it is, it's already a long time coming for these kids. I would like to see the full HVAC added in, and I think that there are other areas in here too. If you guys want to go back with the full budget, I'm comfortable with that as well,
That's
but,
my vote.
Well, okay.
sorry, I don't mean to usurp
no, no.
the security thing, of course.
No,
but,
no. It's fine. Again, I'm just looking at, yes, there's a intersection here between sort of, the need, like what are the have-to-haves? And maybe you all would say they're all have-to-haves versus what I think may be feasible. And so I guess the question is, given the roadmap that we've provided, right, to Steve's point, if we were to look at the things that we've suggested cutting, what are the things, so, you can go either way. I mean, what are the things that we absolutely want to add back, have to add back? Is there anything that we can defer?
Right.
I guess is the question.
I can speak of this as best I can. I mean, you get to, it's not flashy, it's not pretty, the driveway paving. We've been told since we actually were able to get some paving accomplished and some maintenance accomplished, it was about 10 years, we were told, no, when you see what our driveways and what our parking lots look like. So although it's not a tremendous upgrade, it's not really flashy, it's necessary. West Playground site renovation, again, it's a little bit of money for water runoff to stop the eroding, safety hazard for the kids. The blacktop is in complete disarray. It needs to be done. It can't be shifted, which is why we didn't shift it. Not flashy, but completely necessary for the kids. It's an accident waiting to happen. Furniture purchase, that can go either way. LED retrofit, we're working on. We're anticipating a report very soon, which is why we removed that. That could stay off. We already have year one from last year. The locker room replacement for the HVAC unit struggling, like I had said earlier, and when you had asked me, I put that back on. VAV boxes are starting to fail at a pretty good rate, and unfortunately, that's for every single space in the intermediate school, first floor, second floor, so it's going to start choking down the fresh air coming into the space, tempering the space. Necessary, needs to be done. Core boiler and pumps, me and the guys were down there, went over everything. This is a project, be great to get out of the way, but I think this is something, after the last handful of days of discussion, that can be moved a year, but only a year. I replaced personally a section about 10 years ago, so it does have signs of failing. This was put back in 1995, I believe it was, so again, we're at that end of useful life. So if there's one project that we hadn't shifted the first time, but like I said, talking to the guys, talking to our boiler technician who does our servicing on a yearly basis, I think that's something that we can move out. North House HVAC, We shift 1 year, we lose 3. So to me, that has to be here this year.
On that one, would you be comfortable with the reduction that they proposed?
No.
I was
You're
asking.
directing him. I
I'm-
should
I-
not answer.
We'd have to,
I'm-
Michael, the expert, not me.
we'd have to get really creative. I based everything on pretty accurate numbers. I think that we would be taking a huge risk. We wouldn't be able to complete the project, or we would have to piece it out and then add to it down the line, which is going to get us scrutinized anyway.
So I need the 1,700,000. Okay.
Radio upgrade, obviously, it's increased $50,000. It's absolutely necessary. Table purchase for the WIS, we can hold a year. Reston Field site work, we can push if we needed to.
Okay, so last comment by me, and I'll shut up, but I just, maybe not. If I have this sort of process right, Phil, this will be whatever we approve will be presented to the Board of Finance. And to Steve's point, they can sort of go line by line and reduce in any manner in which they feel fit. Got it.
What will be presented and discussed with the Board of Finance is what was conveyed by the Board of Selectmen.
But we're going to tell them tonight, we're going back, we're giving them a different number.
Correct. So I think we will inform them tonight, and in our discussions tomorrow, we will say that our board tonight approved X. So, go ahead.
So here's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid, so when they go, let's say, line by line, they request the input from you guys, correct? Are you guys talking them through? So if they said to you, hey, look, we're gonna cut this in half. So you guys advise us how to cut it in half, or we're gonna make this decision unilaterally. They make it unilateral.
I think more times than not that we do give our inputs, but at the end of the day, the Board of Finance will make their, collective decision in terms of
Okay.
what they cut or a number that you're trying to get to, and then they may make those cuts to get to a number.
But with the problem with, if they just give a number, that's wrong. I mean, I'll say, that's just wrong,
Right.
you know.
Okay, so they would actually go through and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
cut. They would, okay. So, look, in a lot of ways, we here today are sort of, held captive by, let's say, decisions or not making decisions in the past here, and now we're having to deal with all of this. And look, I agree with all of you in that a lot of this, if not almost all of it, right, has to get done. It has to get done as soon as possible. But I am also trying to avoid having someone else make the decision for us. And so if we know that the Board of Finance is not going to approve $3.3 million, does it behoove us to say, okay, we're going to reduce that, maybe not to the 1.7, but at least it puts the decision-making in our court in terms of what we think maybe at least can pass or is more likely to pass, as opposed to having them cut. So, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, and I think it's more, we don't know where the Board of Finance is and what they will approve. I think over the past couple of weeks, and they've been working on their debt capacity and everything else. So there'll be a lot of discussions, most definitely, because I think combination of the Board of Education and the town, they've never seen this kind of request, right? Because we've been averaging maybe 2.5 million or so. We came in with 6. I think the Board of Selectmen did make some adjustments. So they're coming in with a lower number, but that number, even still, is much higher than where we were last year.
Meaning, if we actually, let's say reduce it somewhat, let's say from the 3.3, is that, first of all, it puts the decision-making, at least to a greater extent with this body. And then secondly, it does somewhat, I don't want to say, it does show an effort and a sort of cognizance that that number is very high, and that we are taking into account, some of the feedback from the Board of Selectmen, and we are trying to sort of meet them sort of halfway. Again, Maybe it's 2.9 million, I don't know, but,
It's 3.1.
no, it's what?
I mean, if you,
Yeah, based upon what Mike said, yeah. So I guess my question is, we can go back with the 3.3, and then does the Board of Finance take, real exception to that? Because, their position can be, hey, look, you're requesting, capital budget, even as we think it's necessary. A capital budget 3 times what it's usually been. Again, we've talked about how it's artificially low. And the Board of Selectmen cut this in half, and yet you're coming back to us with 3.3. And so I don't know if that hardens their stance in terms of, well, you guys aren't even trying to meet us or meet the town halfway. So I guess that's my concern here.
I
but
I agree. I think that, I'm not saying we need to go back with the full 3.3. I think if we show some
But, okay,
flexibility,
so let's
but.
just go through the numbers, right?
We
So-
did with Mike. It's like if we just, I mean, it looks like, to be perfectly honest with you, we're not getting new furniture this year,
I
right?
think we have to just double check the numbers,
Yeah.
because I came up with 2.7. I could be wrong.
You're,
So district-wide security, what did you say?
Working together.
I left.
Absolutely.
Keep it at 100.
Keep it at 100,
Yes.
right? District-wide PA is 100.
Yes,
Energy is 40. We're keeping that.
we're keeping that.
The West Playground, we're keeping, correct?
We're definitely keeping the West,
Have
the,
to.
the West playground.
Parking, you're saying no?
No, parking, we're saying yes.
Saying yes.
I may disagree with Michael on one thing here, and we're gonna get to that in a minute. If anything, what we could do, right, the 40,000 that we have here for the BMS upgrade, we can maybe shift that and try to cover that cost from our operating budget. A little bit risky, but if we're trying to do stuff, we could probably do that.
Are you talking about the energy management?
The 40,000, correct.
I want to be real clear. $50,000 for furniture is a drop in the bucket.
Yes.
It does nothing. It really does nothing. We're going to have to come up with a much bigger plan. We've been piloting different furniture, and forget it. I'm very
Look, the swing number is the high school locker room,
At 190.
that 190. The rest of it is, where we reduce it to zero is.
But Mike, you said that you thought we could perhaps move that one a year, correct, or not?
I think Mike mentioned the core, was it a core?
Or is it the boiler?
Yeah, it was the core to boil.
Okay, sorry.
So
That makes me nervous.
So, correct. So while we may be able to, similar to the locker room, while we may be able to defer an item for a year, we can, right? We can defer this, similar to how we're deferring replacing the unit for the locker room. But what that does is that it's going to require more maintenance on that unit, and it also leaves it susceptible to failure. Not saying that it is going to fail. So it's already showing signs of wear and tear, and for the mere fact that is showing wear and tear, I would say that we keep that item in,
The boiler.
the boiler.
What's
If we have to
the
choose
generator?
between,
What's the lead,
Generator
if it
failed.
fails, what's the lead time to replace it?
It changes. We had to do a couple of section replacement at the. We do a couple section replacement at the middle school this summer. It initially started off as a 3 to 4 week lead time. It turned into about I think it was 15 weeks. So it's cast iron, they're molded at the factory and they come in, so we're at the mercy of the supply house which makes them. And if there's a lot of boilers going in, one section to us isn't going to
So it's
prioritize what they're gonna ship it to.
Potentially 3 to 6 months.
It could certainly get you to 3 months, it could be even more, especially now with the tariffs going in. We have really no idea how long things are gonna take at this point. It's all new.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm done. I just saw new hurdles that we're up against now.
I see things a little bit differently. Respectfully, I disagree, and I actually disagree with yes, collaboratively. Here's why. I actually think this process is a little bit broken, and I think throwing a bit of a cold water into the faces of the people who are offering a different suggestion is a good idea here for the following reasons. I think the part of the process that is not sustainable is not these numbers. The part of the process that is not sustainable is kicking down absolutely essential changes that have to happen to our district year over year over year. We're looking at this list. There's not a bunch of fat on here. Even the one just now, Lisa talking about furniture, we're throwing out, oh, we might not get new furniture. That's not new furniture. This is furniture that over the last 3 years, Lisa has researched is going to actually be a more positive experience for our children in the classrooms, but how it actually is additive to educational outcomes. There's not fat on this. So if you all want to choose a thing or two that you think actually could be moved, fine. But I think it's and I actually feel oppositely, which is the following. I don't know about you, but I don't relish another 2 years of having the parents, security-minded community show up here. So let the Board of Finance say, here's a line item we should rule out. I don't want to have a bunch of parents again saying to me, you guys took out $300,000 from the security budget. Let the Board of Finance do that if they can do a much, much better job in this capital budget, which I don't think they can. And I think we have to begin to acclimate ourselves to the fact that we're going to have to make investments in our schools each year's something we've avoided doing.
I have no, I have no problem with that. It's not like, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, these are not wish I had, it's have to have.
Look, I'm not opposed to it either. I'm trying to just think through the process. And look, I mean, you look at those numbers going forward, right, in the coming years.
Exactly.
We're going to have this problem again.
Exactly.
And again, we're going to have this discussion.
Exactly.
The-
Each year we'll be asked, like, can
Yes.
you skinny this down?
Yes.
But
Well,
no,
and
it
that's-
only
and
gets-
that's
it only gets
essentially
worse.
what we've
The
been doing.
Parabolic curve, am I saying that right? Parabolic curve only gets worse. So
Right.
what are we doing?
So we keep on talking about the problems that we're having, and this is what it's going to cost, and we're kicking it down the line. But I'm going to go back to what Peter said about HVAC. It's going to come down to, are we waiting for a crisis? Not having a boiler, you can't not have a boiler in the middle of winter. So now you have to call in an outside trucking unit. I don't know, how many millions of dollars is that going to cost? So it's not kicking it down the line, it's what crisis is coming up and how much is it going to cost? How many people are going to sue the school district? Sure, don't fix the parking lot, except when the first person breaks their leg and starts suing the school district for millions of dollars, you're going to have issues. I know this, and in this litigious society, how many lawsuits? So our law bills are going to go up. People are going to sue us because it's all great and good. And I used to go into my staff and I would say, I need your emergency numbers. No one fills it out. And I would have to say, the emergency room is filled with people. Someone has to get hurt. And the idea is, take a look at this list. Where are we going to get hurt? We're going to get hurt when we lose our boiler. We're going to have to bring in you bring in a truck with boiler. Got to heat the building. HVAC, someone's going to come in with rashes or mold or whatever. Next lawsuit. So when are we going to be proactive rather than reactive? And I think that's what the concern here is. It's not kicking it down the line. It's where are these crises going to hit us? Because you can't keep on piling them up and think, we're the perfect school district. Crisis doesn't happen here, but it does. And that's why we've taken so much time with our security. This is the safest school district in the entire country, and we have worked on security to make it safer. And so we need to make the other areas of our schools safer too. It's not kicking it down the line, it's being proactive so we don't have a crisis and really pay
Let's just make a
very
decision.
large sums of money to make it better.
Do you want to say something, or can we just make a decision?
So I think I'm hearing that perhaps the best way to proceed would be to add back certain items, but not the original amount.
Well, Chad, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think, Chad, I think
Yeah.
your perspective is just go back, right, to
That
the
is my
original.
perspective. Yeah.
Look, I think, and that's fine,
That's
I think a lot of this
Do
needs to
with
be
them.
voted,
Don't let them cut it.
obviously, voted forward. I also think that this is going to require a longer discussion with the Board of Finance, because these numbers for the next couple of years are going to be much greater than they have been in the past. And maybe that's okay, we're playing some catch-up here, right, because of things that we haven't, let's say, addressed. And I'm fine to do it. I just, again, I'm worried myself that I don't want the Board of Finance to go making decisions that are, let's say, less informed than we can make for ourselves. To your point, maybe this is the way to, change things up and rile up the process that is obviously broken. Maybe that's the case. I'm happy to do it, to go back to the original. Again, I'm just worried about what they are going to come back with if we don't show sort of any ability to.
But we're, the only number,
Yeah, I know, it's
it's just such a
minimal, it's minimal,
minuscule amount of
basically.
number
It's-
that, like,
It's minuscule, and you know what?
Yeah.
At this stage, we're negotiating against ourselves.
Yeah, okay,
So-
fine, let's vote on
okay.
it then.
Yeah.
So, can I have a motion to
Phil, do you want to say something?
No, what are we voting on first?
reverting back to the original capital budget? Then there's no need to,
Then, there's no need to vote. So let's vote on,
we never.
we have to vote it down. So you have the
This was a recommendation by the Board of
selectmen.
Selectmen.
So I would make a motion to pass the revised budget, and then everybody votes. Okay, so I make the motion to pass the revised capital budget in the total of $1,710,000 as recommended by the Board of Selectmen.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. And then,
Those in favor?
okay, so we go around and vote. So Lisa, you want to go first?
No.
Michael?
No,
No.
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 There we go.
Motion fails.
You're
Okay.
just seconding the motion, I just had it like ours.
Would have been even easier if you didn't have a
Can't
second.
vote unless there's a second.
So do we need to now put forth a new motion?
No, because
You
we,
didn't change something, so the budget, the way I understand it is you put through the original capital budget of $3,336,000, correct?
No, well, we did. However,
Yes, you did.
what was transmitted by the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Finance is a lower amount.
right, but that was not approved by us.
Correct.
Okay.
Would you feel comfortable, Phil, if we do another vote to say that we want to reaffirm the
Exactly.
original number?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
Make the motion,
Yeah, we're doing it.
additional motion.
All right, so I move that we reaffirm the initial capital budget of $3,336,000 to be transmitted to the Board of Selectmen.
Board of Finance.
Sorry, to be transmitted to the Board of Finance. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right,
Lisa?
Yes.
Michael?
yes,
Yes.
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 Yes, motion passes.
okay.
Any items else on the agenda? Motion to adjourn?
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go.